It's with me, your host Ibrahim Asonko, and today I have with me my very erudite legal professor from the University of the Gambia, and also senior legal luminary who is widely celebrated not only in the Gambia but also in the African continent. Gaye Sowe is my guest, and I'm going to talk to him today on a variety of issues, including his most recent appointment with the ECOWAS Commission as Director of Legal Affairs. And if you know Gaye Sowe, you also know that he, at some point, also worked at the ECOWAS Commission as Registrar of Appeals, Arbitration and Enforcement. He was also the Executive Director of IHRDA. He's been involved in various levels of stakeholder discussions and presentations on human rights law, on constitutional law. He was also a member of the Constitutional Review Commission of the Gambia. He is a researcher, he is a scholar, he is a human rights expert. We can go on and on and on about a list of what his resume looks like. But he's an individual that don't really enjoy talking about himself. And I said to him, well, Gaye, for somebody like me, there's a lot of your work that we know and we interact with. But I think there is also a part of you that a lot of people also would like to know. And so I'm very much appreciative of him coming on today to have a conversation
Thank
with
you.
me on all the issues that we're really interested in. Gay, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very good, Mr. Sonko. Thanks for having me. I've watched some of your interviews, and I find them all really interesting. Having conversations with people from different backgrounds. So I'm very happy to be here. Thanks. Thank you.
Eh, Thank you very much, Gay. Gay was my criminal law
Yeah.
lecturer at the University of the Gambia, and by the way, he also was one of the founding members of the Gambia Law Faculty as well, and would go on to also teach at the University of, the Gambia Law School. So there is a lot of connections here between a lecturer and his student. And so all
Thank
the
you.
questions you can imagine that I want to ask him, I'm going to ask him all those questions today. So, Gay, I cannot help
Yeah.
but observe the prominence of Gambians at the ECOWAS Commission. The president of ECOWAS, for example, is a Gambian national, and also
Yeah.
recently we've also seen another registrar, the former AG, Mari Sen, is also Gambian, and you are also Gambian. So it seems there is an upsurge of Gambians at the commission right now. What would you attribute this to?
Um, I think we are known for being very, very hardworking professionals. That cuts right across. Quite apart from ECOWAS, you have tons of Gambians working in the UN system, some in the AU system, and we're known to deliver every time we're given assignments. Yeah, in fact, even before we had the current president, some of these positions are allocated. In 2022, the position of president was allocated to the Gambia, and the current president ended up getting the assignment. The next allocations would be this year. I understand, based on the communique we got from the Authority of Heads of State, Gambia is going to get JABA, that's the anti-money laundering agency in Senegal, and we also, for the first time, going to get a judge, as in a Gambian, as a judge of the court. So quite
Wow.
apart from Dr. Toure, we have, as in the Honorable President of ECOWAS, we have some Gambians working at the commission itself. Maria and I started working at the court at the same time. She started as the registrar responsible for judicial archives, publications, and I started as the registrar for appeals, arbitration, and enforcement. In March this year, last year, the former deputy chief registrar of the court retired, and I had to step in. Quite apart from running my division, I had to step in as the acting deputy chief registrar of the court. I was in that position until the end of last month. And good to state, when I left, another Gambian, that's Mary Sen, stepped in. Mary is not just running her division. At the same time, she is now the acting deputy chief registrar of the court. You know, at ECOWAS, there is nothing like promotion. So you act, they will advertise, and then you compete. If you get it, you move into that role. So while I was there, it was advertised, but in between, this opening at the commission came up. Applied for it, I was shortlisted, went for the interview, and thank God I got it. But we also have Gambians, like at the moment, the current director of finance and admin of the ECOWAS Parliament is Gambian. And even the current head of department for HR at the court is also Gambian. She was working in Burkina Faso with the health organization, WAHO. Towards the end of 2024, she moved in to the court as the head of HR. So we have Gambians doing quite well, not just, like I said, in ECOWAS, doing well in so many other places. I think we're known for being very, very hardworking. We always give our best, small, but just like our national team is called Scorpion, right? We have that bite. We're quite well known and very much respected when it comes to that. And if you go to the court, they will tell you when we join, at least both of us push for some very significant changes. And we're beginning to see some of these things bear very, very good fruits. So yes, we are hardworking people, to be honest. Yeah. And
So
we are
I'm gonna
also very good professionals. Yes.
yes. So Gaye, I'm gonna take it back a little bit. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, how did you first come to law as a profession, a vocation, or something more existential?
I remember the first time I said I wanted to be a lawyer. I was in primary 4. You know, our normal primary school stuff. The teacher would ask, "What do you want to be when you leave school?" I don't know what happened. I said lawyer, and I had no idea what that meant. So when I went home, I had to ask, because I needed to go and explain why I wanted to be a lawyer. I had no idea what I was going to say. So I remember speaking to my dad, I'm like, what should I tell them when I go back to school tomorrow? His response at the time was, yeah, to help my people on the African continent at primary 4. That was the response my dad gave me. And when schooling up country, English not being your first language, you have that translated directly.
Yes.
And that translation stayed in my head to help my people, my parents on the African continent. That stayed with me forever. But when I went to high school, I did Amitate 5 years. Then I ended up at the Gambia High School, sixth form. From my Form 1, I was really very good. French really was my favorite subject.
Oh, wow.
From saying I wanted to be a lawyer at primary 4, all of a sudden started thinking I wanted to be international. So probably the best for me would be to do translation, talking about the end of sixth form, looking into the possibility of spending a bit of time in Senegal. So then I had an uncle who was working for ECOWAS in Lagos. So send me forms to fill French, lawyer at the back. And when I went to another uncle, just around Pipeline Mosque, he's late now, Mr. Mohammed Sise, he looked at my results, he was like, why would you want to go and study translation in Nigeria? Even if you do, you might end up speaking French with an English accent. Look at your results. You have what it takes to be a lawyer. Do you want to spend the rest of your life working for someone? How about you go do law so that maybe eventually you will end up getting your independence? So that primary 4 thought kicked back in. And not knowing Nigeria well, because we had options. At the time, Nigeria used to give about 30 places to the Gambia, different universities. And I remember when I was at Hermitage, we had this teacher. He's late now, Mr. C, Musa C, literature in English. Really was very good. And we were told he went to Ife. And of course, after my sixth form, I spent a bit of time at the courts working as an interpreter. And I came across some lawyers I was told went to Ife. I had no idea where that was, other than, of course, reading about the Yoruba people in history. So I then made Ife my first choice. And I ended up getting admitted, finished, came back home, and I, of course, started as a magistrate. Yeah. So at first, going back, what is it called? Primary four. That is when I first said I was going to be one. But because, like I said, I was very strong French, I thought about changing. But after that conversation with my uncle, as in, you have what it takes, your results are good, you wouldn't have any problems getting admitted. And at the end of the day, that really would give you the opportunity to maybe support yourself, support your people. Why not go for it? So that really was the primary consideration. I would sit here and say, oh, from the beginning, I was thinking of becoming a lawyer and maybe coming in to fight for my people. You can't talk about that when you are that young. But
Yes.
you evolve, you change, you graduate, you come back, you start identifying areas you feel uh, you can get involved in. Those you keep changing every day. So came in, worked as a magistrate. Went to the UK, did my masters in international human rights law. After 8 years, I thought I needed something new. I needed to start practicing what I studied at university for my masters. And that was what led me to human rights work, which I did for 17 years before I joined the ECOWAS club. Yeah, so I think that's quite long. But I mean, as you grow, you see new things, you learn new things, and of course, you begin to change, and then you begin to identify what you think is most important, not to you, but to people around you as well. So, yeah.
And so, to that point that you actually completed with, at that particular formative years of your legal career, I'm curious as to understand, were there specific experiences besides the obvious one that you talked about in classroom with this teacher who asked you about what you want to do, that sort of formed your sense of justice and moral purpose of law, and how that evolution came? Obviously, as you grow, as you work, as you learn, the philosophy changes. Other things become much more important to you, other things become less important to you. But if you walk us through your trajectory in terms of whether there were experiences or defining moments that sort of help to shape your legal philosophy.
Yeah, I started as a magistrate quite young, in my mid 20s. Started Brikama, many cases, and after a few months, um, I then was moved to Basel. And it wasn't like now. Now you go to Brikama Magistrates Court, you have about more than 3, 4 lawyers. I remember being at Brikama Magistrates Court on my own, as busy as it was for many years. And I remember having to cover the whole of the CRR, URR, going around, bringing, justice to the people, So for me, I think that really was quite innovative, like from having sittings in Fatoto, then having to cross to the other side, having sittings in Sarengai, all the way to Kauru, then you go to the other side with Hamaba. When you're young, of course, that really was a huge responsibility. But I had a dad who always would keep me grounded. If happen to know anybody from the Lower Salem region, my dad was known to be a very strict person. Maybe a no-nonsense person. I mean, and I remember I had issues with that at the university, not allowing people to come to my class late, etc.,
Yes,
etc.
yes,
And I remember
yes.
he would always tell me, I don't know whether, sometimes they say, Pai Salum Salumi,
Hmm.
Nahari Daret, like they say in Wolof and stuff like that. And I always,
Hmm.
because I was young, he would always remind me, and he would tell me in very clear words, whatever it is, Bula Dara Jaral Jai Sangor. I don't know how to translate that into English or maybe even into Mandinka. But that stayed with me. So as you move around the country, even though young, a lot of people expecting you to dispense justice, a lot of you expecting to do the right thing. So
Hmm.
if you're not really grounded, you might end up getting, and before you know it, you would find yourself into all kinds of troubles. So I was lucky, at least I had a family that would always remind me it really wasn't about getting rich fast. And of course, I also had at the back of my mind, whatever it is, I needed to understand the way my country was run. Spend a bit of time. It really wasn't about let me come in, do my masters and check out, understand how your country is run. And of
Hmm.
course, like I said, that took me all over the country. I was able to get a very good understanding of what the challenges were when it comes to access to justice issues and a host of others, quite long. And at the end of the day, that really, really contributed in shaping me, as in later I branched off into international human rights law, which took me around the continent, which led me, which at least made me handle tons of cases from all corners of the continent, all because of the grounding I had,
Hmm.
how important justice is. Like, you know, not just justice based on technicalities,
Hmm.
justice being kind, justice being fair. So that really, from my very beginning, was put into my head, and I have tried living that way from then on until now. Yeah, that's why at the university people thought I was a bit too strict, but it was all about at least.
That's I know. I
Yeah,
remember. I remember those
yeah,
days, and it just reminds me to say that
yeah.
I was not the Jasong Sanyangs of your class, but I was in your class, and I was doing well in your class as well. But I
Yes.
remember just how competitive it was, and just also how, in some ways, how different you were. Your I mean, level of pedagogy and how you were teaching students was also different, right?
Mm.
And that kind of helped a lot of us to understand the ideas and the concept of criminal law and international criminal law as well that we'll later go on to do. But specifically in that regard, I'm curious though to understand when you think about the nature of law, uh, the conception resonates. Which conception of it resonate most with you? Is it the idea of law as an instrument of social order, or law as a guardian of rights and liberty, or law as a transformative force capable of reshaping society? And I mentioned criminal law specifically because, I was in your class, so I knew how we dealt with punishment,
Yeah.
offenses, Gambian statutes, all relating to criminal law. So I'm curious, what aspect of law speaks to you a lot more than the rest of it?
I would say all the above. My
Okay.
problem is I don't like boxing stuff, and I also don't like labels. I consider myself a very realistic person. I'm very, very results oriented.
Mhm.
So I won't sit, for example, and tell you I'm positive is the way I think,
Okay.
natural is the way I think, or real is. Well, I deal with what is before me.
Okay.
So it's all about dispensing justice. Justice has to be fair. It cannot be technical. It has to mean something. Justice has to be kind. And one thing I would, because before I joined the university, maybe I'll give you a bit of history as to how we started. I also spent a long time at GDTI. First, I started with law of contract. Then I did, then moved on to criminal law and then criminal procedure up to diploma level. A lot of my students would tell me, so like saying, the law is for us. not us for the law.
Mhm.
You have to make the law make sense, make it make sense, you know. So you remember, even in class, I would jokingly tell people the number of Latin words I know I can count with one hand. And I would always say, why do I have to speak in a dead language? It's
Yes,
all
I
about,
remember that. Yes.
yes, yes. It's all about getting people to understand you.
Yeah.
It's about not speaking over people.
Mhm.
It's about, making the law make sense. So for me, uh, that is how I see the law. And I can maybe remind you, if you go back, I think the video is on YouTube. When I appeared before the TRRC
Mhm.
in as an expert witness, in my closing remarks, I remember saying, I'm going back to the
Yes.
transformative bit you mentioned.
Yes.
I remember saying, I know we have won the civil and political rights battle.
Mhm.
Like, we don't go around, of course, I'm not saying people's rights are not getting violated, but we know there has been very good progress.
Yes.
And I remember saying, our focus now should be on economic and social justice. And I remember also saying, at the time, they used to tell us about 66% of Gambians were below the age of 30,
Mhm.
and so many of them were unemployed. And I remember saying, that is the biggest security threat our country is facing. So social justice is key, the
Yeah.
only way we can transform our society.
Mhm.
Economic justice, too, is extremely key, the only way we can make the lives of our people better, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you read constitutional law, in a lot of these common law countries, they will tell you education isn't a right, health isn't a right, but prohibition of torture is a right, freedom of expression is a right. There has been that debate. But for me, I have always said, what is freedom if you do not have food to eat?
Yeah.
And what is food if you do not have the freedom to eat it?
Yeah.
So, as much as we're doing a lot to make sure the capacity of our law enforcement agencies are built, we're doing our best to make sure people speak freely. The economics of it, we definitely need to take a look at.
Yeah.
Corruption, fighting corruption is important. And again, social justice too. We
Yeah.
need to move away. Oh, yeah, these are things I think we definitely need to start looking at. Yeah.
So, as someone who has contributed so significantly to the expansion of Gambian criminal law, for example, how do you conceptualize the relationship between law, morality, and state authority? Of course, this is another area that you've taught me exponentially at the University of the Gambia as your student, but I'm really curious as to hear your perspective on it.
I, I am a very morality is important.
Yes.
You know, no society would survive without morals at the end of the day. But morality too is very subjective.
Yes.
So we have to be mindful of that. So the way I see the criminal law, I mean, maybe a bit different from a lot of us. We talked about that in class, looking at morality or the harms principle.
Yes.
Uh, I'm a very big fan of allowing people to make their own decisions, provided they do not cause harm to other people. So, not in favor of having a moral police going around and, of course, some moral codes, some morality rules need to be enforced and all that. But I would rather that we concentrate on, issues which, if not stopped, maybe might be to the detriment of everybody else. So I'm not a fan of, policing people's, what is it called, private homes and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the law is there for a reason. We need to be, like I said, morality key, But at the end of the day, it really does not have to be the only factor you consider when you want to decide on whether to criminalize something or not. Yeah, it is important, but it shouldn't be the only thing we should look at. How about freedom of choice, allowing people to choose, particularly if we know fully well whatever it is that they intend to do wouldn't cause harm of any kind to anybody else. So that's how I see the law, the criminal law. Yes.
Is there any possibility at all for us to have laws, especially criminal laws, that are not informed by some enforcement of some moral value at all?
Um, this is the Gambia. Ours is still a very conservative society.
Yeah.
A lot of the things we do, you are very much aware of the current debate going on in Senegal and what most of our people think about that.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have reached a stage where maybe our National Assembly can come in and say what two men do in the privacy of their home shouldn't be our business. Even if Mr. Sow thinks so, majority of the Gambians do not look at the law that way, and this shouldn't be the law according to Mr. Sow. It should be the law according maybe to our moral values and maybe our traditional belief sometimes. Yeah. So I cannot say everything we do. I mean, oh yeah, it's immoral, let's criminalize it. That wouldn't make sense at all, at all. There are a lot of immoral stuff that we haven't criminalized. And we have criminalized a few things that don't necessarily have a lot to do with morality. You really have to do a balancing. But you cannot afford to ignore everything. The law is there for a reason. Like I said earlier, it's for us. We can't, in the name of satisfying probably a particular group, do something that majority of us do not stand for. Yeah, so there has to be a bit of balancing. But personally, I have just told you what I think. But what I think shouldn't matter. I'm one out of maybe more than 2 million people. Yeah,
Yes.
that's why we call it a
So
democracy.
it's true. Certainly.
Yeah,
So you did highlight
yeah.
it earlier that you ended up training at Obafemi or Wololo University, which is one of the leading African universities, especially in Africa, in West Africa. And you were called to the Nigerian bar as well. And so I'm curious as to what really, from your experience, makes Nigeria a generative legal ecosystem.
Uh, at the time we came here, we didn't have a university. And even after we had a university, it was not until around 2008 we had a law faculty. So we didn't have an option. So if you look around, a majority of our leading lawyers studied here in Nigeria. We have a lot of them who also studied in Freetown, in Sierra Leone, but a lot of them. So Nigeria leading in the sense there was access. It was not difficult. If you had your A levels, it was easy for you to come in. And at the time, a lot of people who were qualified were offered scholarships by the Gambia government. I told you around the time I came here, around January 1993, then they used to reserve about 30 spots for us, different universities. So we have so many Nigerian trained lawyers, and over the years we also have had many Nigerian judges coming into the Gambia to serve. And of course, it's also not that far. And there are also a lot of similarities. We were all colonized, by the
By Great
same
Britain.
colonial masters. So a lot of similarities. So it really wouldn't be about going to a different country so very far away and coming back home having to convert everything you learned. So a lot of similarities, and of course culturally, socially, a lot of similarities. So it really wasn't a problem, and it's still not a problem for us to come in here to at least study. Yes.
And I also remember this vividly. In some of your classes, we were relying a lot on courts, I mean, cases or case precedents from other jurisdictions, including
Yeah.
Nigeria. While in other classes, there was an over reliance on common law, other common law jurisdictions like the United Kingdom, for example, or US. But in your class, it almost feels as though there's an intentionality in taking reference to Nigeria, especially when it comes to criminal law. And so I'm curious, what is the motivation behind this? Specifically, was it because you studied in Nigeria, or because at the time until now, Nigeria is at the apex of legal common law legal system development, especially as regards to criminal law? What was this motive as to why you were relying a lot on Nigerian case laws?
I think it has to do with access.
Okay.
Nigeria has a very well developed law reporting system. But if you remember correctly, some of our first topics, relationship between English law, Gambian law.
Yeah.
I tried as much as possible to rely on Gambian law, and sometimes Gambian cases which decided. So Gambia, of course, we're doing our best now, but not as advanced as Nigeria. So it was all about access, which was why I used to give you guys a lot of reading materials, because I would always say the library at the university wasn't the best. So I would send you a lot of additional reading materials. And whenever I could, I also, but you remember when we dealt with the defense of provocation, there was this Gambian case we discussed very extensively. Yeah. So if there was a Gambian case on a particular subject, of course, we will talk about that. But if there wasn't, Nigeria was closest. Like I said, a lot of similarities in our systems. And in some instances, too, there was also reliance on English law. So Nigeria, because maybe more accessible, and probably culturally, closer to us than the UK is. So maybe that might have informed the bias. But then now that we're producing tons of lawyers a year, we're hoping someday we will have our indigenous jurisprudence, which we will comfortably cite in courts around our country. But, difficult, you don't even how many textbooks on Gambian law do you have? I've been getting a lot of pressure. Your notes criminal procedure. How about you turn into your textbook?
A
Notes
book,
criminal law. But
I
I
said
tell
that to
them
you.
I don't have time. So Gambian, we don't like writing. So for Nigeria, you can have a textbook on all aspects of the law. So I think that must have informed that. But we also did our best to make sure whenever there was a Gambian case on any subject, we at least would bring it up so that we discuss it in class. Yeah.
Would you also say that in terms of the training level, because I also see some level of difference between groups like yours, for example, that went to study in Nigeria, and younger individuals like us that underwent your tutelage in terms of legal training? And I think the level at which you guys are and your group, like the Gaye Sows, the Alaji Marongs, the SFRs, and the CJs, and us, I think that it looks as though, and this is not to belittle or to try to bring down. I think in terms of doctrinal and understanding of the substantive legal issues, you guys have a really great training. Would you say that because you went to Nigeria that had really a wonderful, at least at that level, a way much more developed legal system, and also legal training for their students compared to Gambia that was still very young? Would you perhaps say that could be a contributing factor in terms of how the sort of lawyers that came out between the different times?
Yeah. The thing is, ours is very new. It takes time. And there are some lawyers who have passed through our university who can compete at any level. I used to say it in class. I would always say, you don't have to be Gambia good. If you have to be ready to compete at any level. Sometimes it's really not about the university you attended. It's about how you apply yourself. I can bring out my pen and paper and maybe give you names of more than 100 Gambians who are as good as lawyers you can find anywhere. Extremely, extremely good. But you must remember, ours is the stand. Let me tell you, I told you I was at DDTI. Of course, a lot of people, Mr. Sowe is one of the lecturers at the university. So I was at IHRD. I think at the time I was either a legal officer or senior legal officer. Then Sir Haidara was the justice minister. We were told that we were wanted at the Ministry of Justice. So when we went, the AG at the time, Sir, told us that he got a directive that we should have a law faculty. That was around 2008. It's very, very recent. It goes back to the 60s, so you can't compare. It's way, way. And we discuss here, there, and I remember asking the question, So are we talking about putting something in place in the next 2, 3 years? There was like, no, we have to start immediately. That was how we started.
Wow.
That was how we started. We constituted a committee. I was in the committee together with Uncle Fafa, the late Fafa. May he soul rest in peace. And we then were able to develop the syllabus, like putting pieces together. Universities in the Caribbean, universities in the UK, universities in Nigeria, Ghana, to put together, a syllabus. We then conducted interviews, and that was how we were able to get our first batch of students. And so we were using the printing department and a very, very, very ordinary room. Very, very ordinary. I remember starting with Gambia legal system and constitutional law. A few years after, I then moved on to criminal law, where I stayed. So the point I'm trying to make, you can compare, as in some of these universities founded in the 60s. I was 2008. It doesn't mean every lawyer coming out of Nigeria is top-notch. It also does not mean all lawyers coming out of Gambia top-notch, or all lawyers coming out of Gambia are below whatever. So law is about applying yourself. What you need is the foundation. Remember, I would say that in class, my responsibility is to guide, foundation, lay a foundation, a solid one. At the end of the day, it depends on the individual student, what you make of it. Like now, with the internet, there is nothing you cannot find if you're willing to learn. So I wouldn't say lawyers who finish from the UK, or probably lawyers who finish from Nigeria are better than UTG graduates. Believe me, I know some UTG students, graduates, people in my class. I'm in touch with a lot of them who are as good as you can find anywhere. It does not mean we don't have some who are struggling. But that's the way the world is. It doesn't matter where you go. You can't say all lawyers who went to Harvard are like top-notch. Sometimes, how do you say that? You might find NASA in all fields, but that really has nothing to do with you being at the university, not being at the university. But I would say probably what we needed to do, there was a time I started thinking probably that we had opened the floodgates, because when we started, a credit in math was a requirement. Later they had it changed. People were allowed to do, I can't remember what the course was called.
Access.
Yes, access. And then before you know it, we started having more than like 70, 80, 100 students. I don't have anything against those students who found themselves admitted. But at the end of the day, you begin to, at some point you would begin to ask yourself, maybe some of these students need a bit more time, before they can, maybe, I don't know whether we needed to do making it a postgraduate course like you have in the US or anything like that. But at some point, you begin to think, are we not admitting too many? Is it not more than we can handle? That kind of thing. But like I said, look around. How many judges went to the UTG? The current Attorney General went to the UTG. And we have, people like Satan and a host of others who are doing tremendously well. So I won't sit here and say because I went to a first-generation university in Nigeria, or because somebody went maybe to Cambridge, automatically that person is better than every lawyer trained in the Gambia. It doesn't mean we don't need to adjust. It doesn't mean we cannot improve. Because as a lawyer, education is continuing. You have to keep improving, that kind of thing. It does not mean all of us are at the same level. That's human nature. There are some very good ones. And there are some who really need to buckle up.
So you must be a very proud lecturer too, because your students are all over the place. You just mentioned Satang Nabane. The Satang Nabanes. You look at all over Gambia and outside the Gambia too. Your students are all around the world doing incredible stuff. All of whom, by the way, graduated from the University of the Gambia. And that's one of...
I'm spoiled. Yes. I want anything in the Gambia now, I get. When I'm in the Gambia, I'm like a king. I don't know what I tell them, just something like jokingly. I was like, I can retire now, and I'll be the richest person. All I have to do, go around to everybody I taught, going back to my GTTI days, and I'll tell them to give me $100 each. I would be getting hundreds of thousands a month. So it's a good thing. I always jokingly say, if the pay was good, teaching is something I was going to do full time. I just love sharing. I just love teaching. So wherever I go now, hey, Mr. Sowe, Mr. Sowe, it's a good thing. I'm really very proud when I walk into offices and I see my students doing well.
Yeah. So Dr. Solnjai is my very good friend too. When he saw the flyer for my interview with you, he called me. He's like, bro, please tell Gaye Sowe that I said hello. He was my lecturer at GTDI as well. So he extended his regards to you.
Yes, he's a good man. So
Yeah,
yes,
so,
I remember. Yes.
yeah, he's always here. He comes on pretty often.
Yeah, he's a good man. Yeah.
So, Gaye, moving on, I set out some discussions on your time at magistrate, but you've already talked about that. So I'll move on to a much more nuanced part of criminal law, which is, obviously you are widely credited with your role in expanding and deepening Gambian criminal law, and also to some extent Gambian human rights law as well. Now, what intellectual commitments guided your approach to criminal doctrine?
I am not, like I said, I'm not very, very good with the doctrine thing.
Okay.
This is the problem. Yeah. Let's try to solve it. But I can tell you one thing. You remember in class, I would always say, this is what our law says.
Yes.
But we need to change it. This part does not make sense. Like, particularly when we talked about the defense of insanity.
Yes.
Like guilty insane, having to send somebody who's recovered to a mental home. So my approach has always been like the common sense approach. And if you look through the notes, through our lectures, it was all about discussing the law. If we felt the law wasn't good enough, you would hear me say, this part of the law needs to be changed. And I was lucky. After the TRRC, there was the opportunity to revise our criminal justice laws. And I was fortunate to be part of a team of 3. Myself, Janet Salenjai, and Antuman Gaye. I remember doing, along with my seniors, the desk review. And in the desk review, I identified a lot of loopholes, a lot of outdated laws that did not make sense. And we actually pushed for some of them to be changed. And luckily, the Ministry of Justice at the time accepted close to 98% of our proposals, as in a lot of the laws So other than, because now if you look at the law on bail in the Gambia, it's very, very different from what it used to be. A few innovative changes, here and there. And when we finished the Criminal Offences Act and the Criminal Procedure Act, we also did the Prohibition of Torture Act. There was no law prohibiting, as in no criminal law prohibiting torture. I remember jokingly we told the Ministry of Justice, because some of the guys at the UN wanted us to have that included in the code, but we thought torture isn't just about criminalizing it. There are processes you need to provide for. So we advised it was best that we had a separate law. So, and I remember we jokingly told the ministry, we have done the 2 laws, but the prohibition of torture, we just would throw it in as SADA, So, and luckily, that was enacted. I remember too being contracted. I'm not sure what came out of that. I submitted a draft which was validated to review our prison laws. I was given the consultancy, and I remember doing it with a young lawyer, Miss Jen, is in the Ngoni. So we submitted, and I'm not sure what came of that. But at the end of the day, remember what I said earlier on. It's really not about doctrine. It's all about making the law make sense. Making the law work when you review. I mean, before we had the Criminal Offences Act, change. I would like the law. The last changes would go back so many decades ago. At some point, some of these things did not really make sense. So it was about making the law make sense. This hasn't gone far enough. This is no longer tenable. So we then recommended for some of them to be repealed, for some of them to be adjusted. So it was always about the common sense approach. Remember, I would say in class, you don't need to, all you need to be a successful lawyer is, you need common sense and a little bit of law.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's about the common sense approach, making the law make sense. I've already made that point. So this is not working, this has not worked, this is definitely no longer tenable. So let's try to find ways of reviewing it. So that was what we did, and in the end, we ended up putting in place the three laws I just talked about.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
that specific point though, you know this better than me as well. Most judges around the world, and again, you talked about the fact that you shy away from the idea of putting you in a box or having certain descriptions to your conception of what law is. And even here, you have judges who are conservative judges, you have judges who are liberal
Yeah.
judges, and you have judges who are centrist judges. And most of the time, even though the law is very sometimes very clear and sometimes not so clear, in some ways it reflects in their judgments or when they write their judgments in their decision making process. And so when you talk about the fact that the law is also common sense with a little bit of law is common sense with a little bit of law itself, it begs the question: when you were a magistrate, for example, besides law, what else do you use to make your decisions? Because I'm pretty sure there is something somewhere in your conscience about what is right and wrong that you have to also adduce added to what the law really says.
I believe I have a very strong sense of justice.
Okay.
I also very much believe in treating people rightly. If you're an accused, you have rights. You need to be given those rights. If you are a victim, you also have rights that need to be respected. So it's about, yeah, you would do a little balancing here, there. But at the end of the day, whatever it is, uh, should end into justice. We should be fair. We should be kind. I'm not talking about technical justice. You come in and say, oh, this guy relied on the right section. Based on that, I want the charges dismissed. I really wasn't that kind of magistrate. It was all about, substance, substantive justice, not just about using shortcuts. Very good sense of justice. So at least that helped guide me over the years, And I mean, I remember even after I left, you know, I can't remember finding myself in any kind of controversy or anything of that sort. I would, of course, look at the law and I would apply. And at the end of the day, if there was room for me to be at least kind, that doesn't mean, of course, interference of any kind. I mean, if you can tamper justice with mercy or anything of that sort, of course, I would use the opportunity to do that. I was a big, one thing that I was really very big on was whether the accused person appearing before me has shown remorse. I'm not talking about fake remorse, genuine remorse. I mean,
Sit here.
in most cases, I remember presiding over a case. It was about some neighbors getting into a fight. It was Mandua, and one of them bit the other's ear off. They came to court, and of course, I had a lot of exchanges here and there. The others trying to show the other, I did this to you, and nothing is going to come out of it, blah blah. So, and I remember, in addition to sentencing the lady to a fine, I also ordered her to pay the other lady compensation. And I remember the lady coming back begging for forgiveness. And I also remember making it clear to her, it's not for me to forgive you. You need to go to the other one. If she's okay, I wouldn't even mind. If she wants you to pay installmentally, that's between you and her. But if she wants to pay, he wants you to pay right away. You either pay or you would end up finding yourself at mile two. So having the rights of the victim, and at the end of the day, that would mean, because sometimes even if you order compensation, for a lot of people, all they would need is just an apology.
Mhm.
So I was really, really very, very big on that. I didn't like repeat offenders, you know, and I also did not like people who would break into people. I mean, like criminals who would break into people's houses at night. Cattle theft was big because they would tell you, you sentence them to a fine, they would pay and go and steal again. So I really was very, very strict when it comes to those things. But at the end of the day, the bottom line was, it's not just about sending the accused person to jail. If you send somebody to jail for 10 years, how does that
That's okay.
help the
Yeah.
victim? So I really was quite big on that. And, if the victim was remorseful, very rarely. you would be sent to mile two. So it was all about making sure you do a good balance. So I was really, really very particular about that.
Were there instances too that you were involved in? Say, for example, there's a case that comes before you, and in the interim, the parties are negotiating. In the Gambia, people commit offenses, and young farmer, baral call, and this whole idea of, we're good people, we're peaceful people, and let's use our traditional local institution to settle disputes instead of going to court. Or was it a situation of when matters come before you, they have to be adjudicated, and when parties present themselves before you, the matter has to continue, or you had some leeway in terms of how you administer disputes that parties that come before you want to take out of the court?
Oh, yeah. Legally, criminal cases are not meant to be settled.
Yes.
But we have to understand our society. Sometimes it's brother to brother, sister to sister, neighbors. So those are things you cannot ignore. Of course, as a magistrate, it wouldn't be your business. It's not for you to go around and tell them, settle by force. But behind the scenes, if they're able to talk to each other, they agree they will withdraw the case. They brief the prosecutor. The prosecutor comes to court, applies to get the matter withdrawn. I wasn't the kind of magistrate who would insist on proceeding because the neighbors are going to live together maybe forever. The brother, sister, you cannot change that kind of relationship. So I wouldn't be getting involved as in saying you must settle, if not, I'll send you to jail. That wasn't right. It wasn't something I was, involved in. But at the end of the day, if on their own they negotiate, probably they decide the other would fix this, pay this guy's medical bills. Everything settled amicably. They go to the magistrate. I really wouldn't interfere under those circumstances. So you might say the legal thing to do is proceeding by force. But then if you proceed by force, we're talking about a fight between two brothers. Is that justice?
No, it's not. Yes.
So are you not making things worse? Yeah. So that's just our reality in the Gambia. Because if you go to court, a lot of the offenses committed would always involve people who have known each other for many years. They're either related, they're neighbors, stuff like that. But if they have found an amicable way of settling their dispute, even though you might say criminally, that shouldn't be the case, they shouldn't. I honestly saw nothing wrong with that. Because at the end of the day, you're helping in maybe fixing the problem between the two brothers, the two sisters, between father and son, stuff like that, yeah. But that's our reality. It happens. Nga badi ya kacha.
Nga bunkora kacha, nga badi ya kacha.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if that is serious injury, like you cannot badi ya kacha murder. That's not possible. You shouldn't badi ya kacha rape or sexual violence. Those are different. But I'm talking about maybe instances where somebody's mobile phone was stolen and maybe the perpetrator wants to pay back. Or maybe neighbors getting involved into a fight. Those ones I can understand. But there are some offenses that are so very serious. I really wouldn't say, oh yeah, because the victim has, agreed, the victim of rape has agreed to settle with the accused person. We should just sweep things under the carpet. Those are very serious crimes. But on the face of it, a lot of the offenses committed back home are not all that serious. Maybe neighbors fighting, neighbors getting into quarrels, fighting in public places. Yeah, those kind of cases I had no issue getting them withdrawn.
Gaye, I'm also interested to, pick your brain on the issue of marijuana, for example, weed in the Gambian context. Again, it's connected to the idea of our community being, morally upright, and we, abhor these things that people do. And in our Gambian laws, the taking of drugs, including marijuana, is illegal. And I'm just curious, at what level do you think as a society we'll get to a point where we'll have really sincere conversations about the possibility, because it's a very huge commercial industry where we can, tap into it and make a lot of resources out of it for our economy. And do you have anything to say in regards to what direction the country should take in that respect?
Are you trying to get me into trouble? Oh my God. But let me I chaired the Drug Law Enforcement Agency Board for 2 terms. My term expired, I think, 2022, 2023. But these are my personal views. If you look around, a lot of the people you find at Mile 2 are there for being, I'm not talking about hard drugs here, we're talking about marijuana. And in fact, I don't know, I haven't looked at the law for a while, but the penalties for marijuana possession have been so very stiff. Sometimes you struggle to make sense out of them. But let me tell you what my personal view is. Even, of course, people would say it has negative effects here, there. I'm not looking at the commercial part of it. But I honestly think, even if we do not decriminalize it, we should declassify it. For now, it is prohibited. You must never be seen with it. It's not like, in the Gambia, we have prohibited drugs. We have controlled drugs. Like sleeping pills, not prohibited, control, which means they can be prescribed for you. I would, if I were to have a say, I would say, even if we do not decriminalize, we should get it declassified from prohibited to control. As in, if you're caught, let's say, with a joint or stuff like that, I don't think anybody should be sent to jail for 5 years or more because he or she was caught with a joint. For me, that makes no sense. Just because you smoke cannabis doesn't mean you are a criminal. You know what I mean? So I would say, of course, ideal if it can be decriminalized, but we cannot move away from the fact that ours is a very conservative society. There are tons of considerations other than what is commercial, what is not commercial. It's not for me to say, let's decriminalize. But if we don't, we definitely have to find a way, in my view, of getting it declassified so that it moves away from being prohibited to being controlled. I mean, possibility of you maybe getting a prescription, something of that sort, or maybe to say, anything, if you're caught with, let's say, a kilo or so, that's trouble. But if it is, that's my view. That's my view on that. Because even when I was a magistrate, I used to feel very bad because quite from the mandatory, convicted persons were sent to jail, you pay the fine, and then at the same time go to jail for nothing less than years. And I'm talking about 2001, 2002. And later they had the penalties increased. I think later they had it increased to $1 million. I have not looked at the law for a while. So you do time, and at the same time you pay money. And if you do not pay the money, there is always a default clause. And the law used to say jail of not less than 5 years. Why would you send somebody caught with a joint of cannabis to jail for 5 years? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my personal view. I know I'm going to get hanged for it, but hey, that's what I think.
No, thank you for sharing that. You also did a lot of strategic litigation during your time at IHRDA, where you served as a legal officer, senior legal officer, and also executive director of the IHRDA. And so, in your view, is the regional human rights law substantively transformative, or does it function more as a symbolic moral compass? But because there's a lot of questions as to how effective they are in terms of addressing or redressing human rights, issues around the African continent.
Thank you for the question. I was at IHRDA for 17 years, and during that period, some of the cases I argued myself, whether we're talking about Ethiopia, Mali, Malawi, Niger, Mauritania, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, Tanzania, litigated cases, all kinds of issues, even Gambia. In fact, we tried challenging the Public Order Act. And we had it submitted to I've always said, the law should be changed. Instead of requiring permission, we should say notification. Tell the police you're going on a peaceful march at so and so date, so that they will lay the groundwork, so that there wouldn't be trouble. That's where the world is moving now, from permission to notification. We had it filed before the African court. The African court rejected our case because it held that the ECOWAS court has already dealt with the issue. Yeah. So I have done cases, Cameroon, about it, 12-year-old girl who was violated, and enough to bring the perpetrator to justice. Niger, about slavery, Nigeria, different kinds of sexual gender-based violence. So I know there are challenges, because international law would always depend on the goodwill of states. But at the end of the day, I have been involved in cases that have been very, very transformative. I can give a few examples. We litigated a case against Sierra Leone, and the case involved a government policy that prevented pregnant girls from going back to school. So we litigated it before the ECOWAS court. The court ordered that Sierra Leone should revoke the policy. Sierra Leone has since done that. So here, a court order complied with, and that has made it possible for people who otherwise would have been kicked out to go back to school, finish their education. And other than that, Malawi, because Malawi, before 2018, the case we filed around 2016, their constitution defined a child as someone below the age of 16 instead of the international definition, 18. So you would see a lot of people who were above 16 but below 18 cut off from rights they ordinarily should have enjoyed. So we took the matter to court, and we were able to amicably settle that case. We had the meeting actually at the Paradise Hotel in the Gambia. We shook hands, and we then came up with a timeline. That is really a very transformative case, because under the agreement, Malawi was meant to change its constitution in 3 years, but it ended up doing so in 6 months.
Wow.
So that really was, yeah. And another one about a lady called Fode Mohammed. It was a case we worked on against Niger. She was held as a slave, passed from one master to the other. We were able to litigate a case on her behalf, and we ended up getting her compensation of about a bit more than $100,000. At the time I left IHRDA, she got payment of about 55,000, and she was able to use that to get a house for herself and her children. When I saw the video, I was so moved, a bit struggled not to. So it changes here and there. And of course, there was a case that, it wasn't a case necessarily handled by IHRDA, but we were able to facilitate, as in we got a lawyer for the case, a case against the Gambia, which involved, I think, the UDP, the Honorable Senator Dabo and others, able to get a lawyer, and at the end of the day, they were all paid, 10 of them were paid compensation. So there are so many examples where matters of some very, very pertinent human rights issues were taken up either at the ECOWAS court, the African court, the Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, a host of others. And sometimes the orders from those courts or the recommendations from some of those human rights mechanisms were implemented by government. But it does not mean there was success in 100% of the cases. We've won so many cases. Some going back, remember the case I talked about that 12-year-old girl We
Yes.
struggled left, right, and center, did all that we could, but we couldn't get. I don't know whether that changed, but as of the time I left IHRD about 3, 4 years ago, Cameroon was yet to comply with all the orders. So we've recorded successes, but at the end of the day, we also have been very much frustrated. You keep knocking on doors. I mean, our leaders setting up institutions, but at the same time, they don't give recommendations or orders coming out of these institutions the seriousness they deserve. So that is why when we say international law, particularly international human rights law, one of the biggest challenges we face with is enforcement. Enforcement of the decisions of these bodies is big. Luckily, I moved to the ECOWAS Court to set up that division. When I joined at first, nobody was interested. But now we have the court moving from one country to the other to discuss enforcement. In fact, just this past week, I mean, it was something, of course, we all agreed to. They had a face-to-face engagement with Nigeria to find ways of getting Nigeria to enforce the more than 50 judgments it is yet to enforce. And before then, the court was in Freetown, you know, and I understand next week, I'm no longer there, I'm at the commission next week, they will be going to Guinea Conakry. So it's a big elephant in the room. But that doesn't mean there have not been successes. There have been. I can give you many, many other instances where judgments were complied with. And at the same time, I can give you tons of examples where judgments were not complied with at all. The government not interested at all. Yeah.
So, what your current job at the ECOWAS Commission, which for most people that don't know is the commission used to be named the Secretariat, and I think it was in 2007 that they changed the name from a secretariat to a commission. And then a lot of people also make the confusion because some people, especially I was talking to somebody making the assumption that you work at the court itself. And if you would make that distinction, and then talk briefly about what your job currently entails.
Okay. I said earlier on that I joined the court in October. Where I was hired as registrar responsible for enforcement, arbitration, appeals. And from April this year up to the time I left in January, I also was head of the registry as the acting deputy chief registrar. That is strictly core.
Court,
I've
yes.
been, yes, filing cases, receiving cases against, member states, that kind of thing. But I was at the registry as deputy chief registrar. You are responsible. You like oversee the registry. The registry has a chief registrar, then you have the deputy chief registrar, and then about four other divisions, like the one Mary heads, the one I used to head. Then there is what they call verbatim, and there is also case management, and of course there is language services, about 4, 5. That was the core. But you're right, you did your homework. We had ECOWAS, and at the time the head was the executive secretary, the secretariat. But around 2007, there was a change in like the legal regime, very similar to what you have, the EU. So it then changed from from a secretariat to a commission. Of course, that would mean giving the head of the institution more powers. Like now, ECOWAS does not even talk about treaties and their ratification. Now, what we talk about is supplementary acts, decisions, regulations, etc., etc. So, no longer a secretariat, a commission headed by the president. Chambers was the first president, and I think after him, like I said earlier on, these things are allocated. Gambia, it was our time from 2022 to 2026. The current president, his term expires in July. The presidency is going to Senegal after July, you know. So we don't have executive secretary, but we have the president of ECOWAS, the president of the ECOWAS Commission. There are 3 directorates in the office of the president. There is external relations, there is communication, which is very important, and then there is legal affairs. So those three, because there are about 7 commissioners, you know, so political affairs here, there, but we work directly under the president. So as legal,
Yeah, are you still?
you're the chief legal advisor, whether we're talking about negotiation, whether we're talking about agreements, whether we're talking about grants, whether we're talking about contracts. And at the end of the day, whether we're talking about drafting text, like the heads of state take a decision, you need to change that into legal language. Or the ministers coming up with a regulation, you need to change that into legal language, just like you're drafting a law at the local level. So that is what you do. A lot of drafting, of course, a lot of advice, like documents will be minted to you, legal, please advise, is this contract in order? Is this agreement in order? And what does T to X, Y, Z say about this? So you're like the chief legal advisor. So you advise on all things legal. So it's a directorate, there are lawyers there, and as the director, you're the head of that directorate, as in the chief legal advisor to the president of the commission. That's what I do right now.
So
Is that clear?
yes, that's great. That's great. That's great
Yeah.
distinction. Thank you very much. No, thank you. You are right on point. You also worked at the Constitutional Review Commission of the Gambia as one of the commissioners, and a project that perhaps some would say was very successful in terms of the document you guys came out with after several consultations and resources being invested in excess of 100 more than 100 million Gambian dollars. And others would in fact say it was not successful because the outcome that we all desired did not was not successful in terms of it being voted and accepted as a third constitution for the Gambia. What was that experience like for you, and what would you say are reasons why that constitution failed to pass?
Okay. It was, it was a very good experience. Gambian led, all commissioners, 100% Gambian. And we also tried our best to consult with Gambians around the country. No constituency in that country we did not go to. And had our side meetings, engagement. We even traveled abroad to speak to Gambians. Very, very broad. Very, very broad. I don't think we had seen anything like that before.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, it did not see the light of day. Issues, political, some of it, probably maybe lesson learned. Maybe we should have spent more time, maybe talking to the political parties. I don't know. But we consulted with all of them, had meetings with all of them. Their views we took on board. Yeah, I think that might have contributed. Could have been cultural too. Remember the secularism debate,
Yes.
secular, not secular, so cultural, it really, really was important. And one thing that did not help is, that's one of the issues we have to deal with around the world, the issue of misinformation. That did not help. Some people did not help the cause. A lot of people distorting, as in saying the CRC is trying to legalize homosexuality, a host of those. And I'm like, if that cannot happen under the 1997 Constitution, because the 1997 Constitution was our working document. This part works well, let's improve. This part is missing, let's add. And, we had the 97 Constitution, and if that hasn't led to homosexuality being made legal. I don't see any reason how the 2020 draft could have made that, because we were very much mindful of the loopholes in the 97 Constitution, and then we did our best to make sure that was tightened. You know, like I said, I hold very different views when it comes to these things, but it is not. It wasn't the Constitution according to Gaye Sowe. In fact, I always would tell people there are so many parts of that Constitution that personally I did not like. Like, for example, the way the section on discrimination was worded. But sometimes you have to be realistic. You know, it's give and take. Give and take. You
Compromise,
win some, you lose some. So compromise.
Yeah.
I think that was missing, probably because there was a lot of misinformation. There was also lack of trust. No. So contributed. And very importantly, too, the threshold is super high. For us to have a new constitution, remember the first reading, the second reading.
Yeah.
And remember the percentages you have to get. I mean, the document did not even make the first reading. After that, you have to do second reading, get the required number of votes. And after that, in fact, you have to go to the waiting period. You cannot just do in less than 100 days. You put in the Gazette, wait for 90 days, Gazette again, wait for 10 days before you submit to the National Assembly. Waiting period long. And like I said, the readings, National Assembly, even to get out of the National Assembly has become a problem. But that was not even the biggest problem. If the draft was to make it out of the National Assembly, if you go to Section 226, 50% of registered voters are required to vote for us to have a new constitution. So which means, if we're talking about 800,000 voters, the voter turnout has to be at least 400,000. It cannot be 350,000. In addition to that, more than 75% have to vote yes. So 75% of the 50% that voted have to vote yes. So we say it was, put in the dustbin, but another big challenge would have been, even if it made it out of the National Assembly, would it have seen daylight? I don't know, which is why I appeared on Twitter Space, and unfortunately, a lot of people misunderstood where I was coming from. I don't do politics, never did, never will. I have said this in trainings we conducted at the National Assembly. Gambia will never have a new constitution if the biggest political actors are on opposite sides. I'm not blaming any political party. But the solution is trying to find common ground. I was surprised, oh no, let's go get the former president of Nigeria. The problem is local. So it's all about getting our leaders to talk to each other, make sure they find common ground. When we do, we then can come up with a document that will be acceptable to at least 75% of our people. But, I mean, look at the parties. Is there any party in the Gambia that enjoys 75% support?
Yeah.
I doubt, which is why I've always said we need to find common ground. You know, I don't know how that is going to be done, but for as long as, we have 50% here, 50% there, 40% here, 60 there, 30 there, 70 there, we won't make progress. It cannot be a constitution that will capture everything Mr. Sowe wants or Mr. Sonko wants. That's never going to happen. Like I said, I can close my eyes and maybe refer you to 10 parts, 10 sections in the 2020 draft that I cannot stand at all. But I cannot stand them, but maybe Mr. Sonko can stand them. They work for him. It's a give and take thing. So I don't know. I don't see us having one for as long as we haven't, like that common ground is absent. That's definitely not possible. Yeah. So lesson learned, I don't know. Cause is
Yeah.
political, cultural, and a host
Yeah.
of others. Yeah, but for me, the only solution is, I mean, I don't know. Are there people who would be ready to bring all political actors in one room so that they can come up with something concrete? I don't know. But I don't see the solutions coming from outside. They have to come from within. That is, if we want a new constitution for the Gambia. If that is not the case, we will keep, tabling 100 times and we will never get anywhere.
I mean, I want to focus on the political bit of it a little bit. Of course, you talked a little bit about the importance of political parties, especially on the different sides coming together, and the bigger issue of you know presidential term limit, and the term of the president, when it should begin, when it should end, is arguably the main reason why that constitution do not pass, because there is a widespread acceptance of that constitution as a document that most Gambians want. um, and so at the level of discussion at you guys' level, obviously you don't I'm sure there's some confidential questions or issues that you guys cannot talk about publicly by virtue of your job. But what was the mindset like at the time when you guys were making this constitution, bearing in mind that more than likely you're not making the constitution for the president, you make constitution for everybody, but also the office of the president is in some way, shape, or form affected by the drafting of the constitution. What was you guys' mindset like?
We consulted nationwide. We also consulted around the world, Middle East, US, Europe. But what you saw was very much different from a lot of things that happened on the side. We had face-to-face meetings. We even did a survey. So all these things are documented,
Mhm.
very, very well documented. And I remember fully because we used to we were divided into two groups. And in my group, I was the one who, in most cases, would take participants through the section on the executive. And I remember, I mean, whether it's in Wolof, or whether it's in English, or whether it's in Mandinka, I remember I would always tell them, do we introduce time limits? That's in our questionnaire. The issues document we circulated, all of it is there. Do you want time limits? And I would tell them, please, if you come in to speak to us, you have to tell us what you mean by time limits. Do you want the Putin kind of time limits? If you go on YouTube, you will see the recordings there. Do you want the Putin kind of time limit? Or do you want 2 terms you go? And overwhelmingly, the stats are there. We did a survey. People came out to say nobody should be president for more than 10 years. And I remember it was like, what about if somebody wins, maybe comes back, loses, and wants to come back again? And that shows that guy was a very horrible guy. We shouldn't. And I remember in Mandinka, in all the languages, ni moye sanji tanke amari nyanta tala amanyana nala koteke kudef 10 years kokuna nyubala. The documents are there. This is not speculation or anything. Very scientific. If you go to the Ministry of Justice, they will give you the statistics. So people were very, very clear. So clear to us that we want, like majority of our people wanted 10 years. So we had an option. The parts that made the term limits applicable retrospectively. What do? You can just say 2 terms, you close the chapter. But you know what happened in Senegal? If you close the chapter, then that will be open to interpretation. If you go to court, whether the matter court, not court, within those times, sometimes violence, it happens in so many African countries. You know what I mean? So we felt, because we're talking about a supreme document, which can do or undo anything, we felt it was best that we had it tackled headlong. We didn't have to shy away from it, because clearly That those were the instructions we got from the majority of the people. It wasn't about, oh, let's give this one 10. It's there, like I said, the statistics are there. People can disagree, they can agree. So we then looked for inspiration, and we got from Colombia and from Kenya. Kenya's own 2010 that if you were president for the constitution, you cannot contest again. We didn't go that far. So we said 10 years would begin to count retrospectively. A lot of people coming out saying retroactivity. Retroactivity only applies to criminal law. That's what I'm saying. Constitution is a supreme document. It can do whatever it wants, provided people endorse it. So, do we deal with it in the Constitution, or we leave it open for interpretation? You never know. Courts might take a different view, or before a case is filed, decided there might be trouble here, there. So we looked for inspiration, we got that, and we decided to go that way. But it really wasn't about saying, oh, we don't like this guy, let the guy do 5 years go. No, nothing like that. We got instructions, clear instructions. And for those of us who are interested, the archives are there. Go back, look at the survey we did, look at the percentages, or listen to the consultations we held around the country. People were extremely, extremely clear. People can't tell you why. You then sit in your small room and then decide we're going against what majority of the people did. That was the only reason why we handled it that way. There was no other consideration at all. So whether we were right, we were wrong, history will judge us. But, we did based on instructions we got from the people.
Well, would you say, I think that ship has sailed? We're not going to see any new constitution, not this year. Clearly, it's not going to be next year too. It's not something that we can envision as an immediate thing to happen.
I pray we see it in our lifetime, but I'm not optimistic.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, I'm not.
Me too. Me
I'm
too.
not.
Me too.
Maybe a miracle. Maybe a miracle.
Yes. Yes.
How do you kurus?
Ha, Tata Sabayo.
So we also
Tata Sabayo.
we also hold on to our tasabayos and
Yeah.
yes.
Anyway, Gaye,
Yes.
there's a couple of your
Yes.
students on the comment section. They want to know whether there's any plans to eventually return to the University of the Gambia to teach. I think somebody raised that question, so I thought I should ask you before I let you go.
I can teach virtually, and my contract wouldn't allow me to take any other assignment. That would involve me getting paid or anything like that. Not that the the UTG was paying me an enormous sum. I think about $100-200 at the time. But for now, maybe later, if maybe when I retire and I still think I have something to offer, I hope by then they will say, "Nanyu pabi balal, I can't hold the handy." He's still referring to 1960 stuff. So by God's grace, when I retire and I still think there is something I can contribute, I'll be happy to do that. Quite apart from the university, I was like there. I think when I left, I was the longest serving for about 15 years. I was also one of the founder lecturers of the law school. The law school I did until 2015. When they made me executive director, I'm like, no, this is not something I can add to my load. But I love teaching. I love sharing the very little I know. And if that opportunity presents itself again in future, and I am convinced I have something to offer, I'll be happy to do that.
Finally, Gaye, I ask most people this question when they come here to chat with me. My question is really, what keeps you up at night? What are really fundamental existential questions that you continue to wrestle with, both as a human being, but also as a legal profession? What are things that really keeps you up?
I think the world has gone crazy. I think you now struggle to have a decent conversation. We all seem to be wired a particular way. I am always online looking for one thing or the other, but with all these algorithms, we all are programmed to see things
Yes.
a particular way. So the wall is, getting less and less tolerant. Misinformation gone haywire. Hard work, integrity, honesty, not as important as it used to be. It's all about who makes the most sound. That's why when you called me, I was in Key, and I'm like, how about I stay in my little corner? So that the misinformation, the lies, the manipulation, like that really, really, I mean, so I begin to wonder what will happen to our children when they, reach, before maybe like when before they even reach the age of maturity. So it's a big concern, to be honest. It is insane. Like it looks like the truth has died, kind of. It's all about
Yeah.
clickbait. I mean, let me be as outrageous as I can be. And now, like hatred sells. So
Yeah.
that really, really, really bothers me. What happens to being truthful? What happens to being a man of integrity? What happens to being honest? Those things are, it's all about who has the most followers. And we don't care the kind of message that person is actually spreading. That is really freaking me out. It
I agree.
scares me.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
yes,
I totally
yes,
agree with you. And
yes.
it's somewhat similar to what I think about a lot too. I think the fact that we've become so indifferent to the suffering of human beings. I guess I think there's one philosopher who would always say history is a slaughterhouse. And so,
Yeah.
to put it in context of what we're experiencing as a society today around the world, is there's a lot of people dying. There's a lot of indifference to human suffering. That keeps me up a lot. So much so, sometimes I take a break from social media because it's just, I think I'm wired differently. A lot of people are wired differently as well. But it's the recognition that if a baby or a child dies somewhere that is not meant to die, that bothers me deeply. The same way elsewhere something happens to somebody else. So I care deeply about the tenets of decency, morality, honesty, justice, and all these important things. But thank you very much for sharing that, Gay. And finally, last questions, and I promise. What would you want to be remembered for as you continue this line of work, both in the Gambia and also around the African continent?
It's difficult, to be honest. But, I spend a lot of time online. Of course, podcasts here, there are people who share a worldview that is similar to mine. Of course, I try because I know, of course, it's just, I don't know. It's very, very scary. Very, very
It is.
scary.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I don't know if you're getting me, but my last question is to let you go is what would you like to be
Okay.
remembered for?
I came around. I helped when I could. I told you about human rights cases I litigated around the continent. And I mean, I remember how fulfilling I found that, you file a case knowing fully well if you win, millions of people stand to benefit. So, at least in my own little way, I tried, making the African human rights system better by not only doing capacity building around the continent on the African system, but also taking up many, many cases around the continent. So even though little, I did my best to make sure I made our human rights system better than I found it. And of course, I also tried all that I mean, I tried to be as kind as I could have been or I can be. When I can help, I help. You know, going in like there is a lot to do, but in my own little way, I think, tried my best to make sure at least I contribute in making my environment as best as possible. Yeah.
Well,
So I
thank you
don't know
so much.
whether that's a bit
Yes.
of legacy to be
Yes.
remembered, but I did my own, contribution definitely.
Well, let me just end by saying that if human, I mean, student success and people that underwent your your training is anything to go by, I think we can safely say all of you form part of your legacy. The Satang Naban is in the comment section. Imran is in the comments. Peter Murray, Jasong Sanyang, Yusufa Job, all of these individuals here are all sharing their stories in terms of the impact that you've had on their lives. So thank you very much, Gaye Sowe, for being here. Thank you for sharing a piece of your story and journey with me. It's really wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sonko. And you're doing well. Keep it up. You remember the day you walked into my class, you wanted to make a political speech.
You kicked me out, yes, I remember.
This guy with his strong arm and all that. What do you want? You're interrupting my class. Did I allow you to speak that day?
No, not that day. That day, no.
Allow you, huh?
No, not that day. No. Okay, no, because usually you don't have a lot of time, so I understand that. You just come to class and you don't have a lot of time and you have a lot to cover. But the next class, you allowed me.
Okay, thank you. But thank you. At least
the next class.
But thank you. This was fun. I mean, it's always good to at least share your little experience with other people. Yes. Thank you. And my regards to all your fans who commented.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thank you all.
So I can go now.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.